The man on the bus. I've never forgotten this event, even though it happened over 10 years ago. I'm 26 now, and I still get goosebumps, and it's definitely scarier from my adult perspective. Actually, to be more precise, this event lasted over 6 months. To give some context, it all started when I was about 14. At the time, I was attending a private school in the south of France, and I used to go home to my grandmother's house every night to wait for my mother to get off work and pick me up. My grandmother, a retiree, would wait for me in her car outside school, but as time went on, I increasingly wanted more independence. So I asked her if I could take the bus home from now on, and she didn't mind. I liked to put my headphones on and enjoy the long commute, listening to my favorite music and being in my own little world. The closest bus stop to her house was about a 10-minute walk away because, by some unfortunate coincidence, the one across the street from her cul-de-sac had been closed due to insufficient traffic. But that didn't bother me, being a lazy person by nature. So I started taking the same bus every day at roughly the same time, although it could vary since I didn't have classes on Wednesday afternoons, for example. By the time I was 14, I was really looking like a child. When I say child, I mean I've always had a childish face, but this time it really showed. I didn't have woman curves. I always had cute stuffed animals attached to my bag. Well, I guess you can pretty much get the picture. And then I noticed this guy for the first time on the bus. It must have been around September or October. He was in his 40s, not very tall and bald. Why did I notice him, you might ask? Well, because he was staring at me. I even had the impression he wasn't blinking. He gave me smiles that didn't inspire confidence, but it was completely instinctive. I had never been confronted with the reality of the world. I was still very naive, but I knew something was wrong. I didn't say anything. I just decided to flee the situation that didn't make me feel comfortable by looking in another direction, and that was it. That was just the very beginning of something I would remember forever. This man took the same bus as me every day at the same time, even when I changed my schedule. Even today, I have no idea how he could have gotten this information. Was he watching me? Did he live near the school? He always stared at me with his strange smiles, relentlessly, but didn't speak to me. I would get off the bus at my stop, he would stay on, and then the cycle would start again the next day. This situation terrified me so much that I didn't dare talk about it to anyone. I was afraid they wouldn't believe me, and also that I would be forbidden to leave the house afterwards. And then one day, it was around May-June at the end of the school year, I got fed up. I got off at a stop halfway through the trip and hid naively behind a tree to try to lose him. I couldn't stand the persistent stares anymore. Except that then the guy got off too, and he started looking for me. There was no one around, and then I thought I wasn't safe. The guy was calling me, "Where are you, pretty? Come on, let's talk together." I was, so to speak, sweating and unable to move from my tree. Of course, he found me in the end. "You're really very pretty, you know. I'd like to talk, to get to know each other." Frankly, I didn't want to get to know him at all. He terrified me, and I wanted to go home. I tried to make him understand that he was freaking me out and that I wanted him to leave me alone. I asked him what he wanted, and he kept saying the same thing over and over again, just to get to know each other. The next bus arrived, and I took the opportunity to run on it, except so did he. And the same thing happened again. He sat down, stopped talking, and stared at me, smiling. I was in an internal panic. My thoughts were racing, and I didn't know what to do. I made the worst decision, getting off at my usual stop and going back to my grandmother's house anyway, thinking he was going to do what he always did and stay on the bus. Except this time, he got off at the same time as me. The stop was in a very quiet area and was lined with small dirt paths that served as shortcuts to access parallel roads. I then thought he was going to kidnap me, take me down a small path, and I'd never be able to go home again. But I didn't want him to notice my fear because it seemed to fuel him with a kind of dominant pleasure. So he started asking me to get to know each other again, while following me. I picked up the pace, but he kept pace. In short, he wouldn't let go. I finally reached my grandmother's alley, and I finally saw the light at the end of the tunnel. I ran to her house, and she was standing in the doorway reading a book. She saw me arrive, all red, still shaking with panic, with the bald guy watching us from behind the gate. Seeing my expression, I didn't need to talk to her. She screamed that she was going to call the cops if he didn't run away soon. He turned around and left the dead-end street. After that, my grandmother categorically refused to let me take the bus again. Until my senior year, she picked me up in front of the school gate every day. I never saw that man again. When I think that this guy, this adult, followed a 14-year-old girl home, that he was obsessed with me, and that it happened every day, who knows how far it could have gone? That's perhaps the most disturbing thing about this whole thing. Today, I no longer take public transportation unless I'm accompanied, because it terrifies me. Never forget to close a blind. It happened to me last night. I've never been so scared. I'm 18 years old and have been living alone for 3 months in a student apartment on the top floor of a building right in the historic heart of the city. Since my apartment is in the attic, I have a skylight almost above my bed, but I don't open it often because I'm not tall enough. Yesterday I opened it early in the afternoon and ended up forgetting about it because it got dark early and I'm not used to opening it, so I didn't think to close it. And then I went to sleep around midnight. At 3 a.m., I was woken up by loud noises coming from above me, which didn't make sense because I was under a roof. The noise is very loud, right above my bed, a little off-center from the skylight, as if someone were jumping or stamping their feet above me. And that's when I realized that the person, because it's impossible for it to be an animal, can see me through the skylight, 50 centimeters away. I had a kind of star-shaped nightlight on that gave off a lot of light. It basically lit up the whole room, and as soon as I realized that because of that, I could be seen through the window, I grabbed the remote and quickly turned it off. When I turned it off, the jumping stopped for 15 seconds and started again immediately afterward, as if the person had realized I had turned it off. He kept stamping his feet and walking over me for 10 minutes, then it seemed to stop. Terrified, I stared at the skylight, motionless, recording what I heard with my phone to have proof. Then I made out a head, pressed against the skylight, trying to see something inside the apartment. He stared for 10 to 20 seconds, then left, walking calmly across the roof next door. When he finally left, I realized the person was doing everything he could to wake me up, and I called the police straight away, who didn't really take me seriously and thought I'd just seen an animal. They sent a patrol to the scene anyway. I knew it was a human and not an animal. The noise on the tiles was too loud, and I could only make out his head, watching me through the skylight, whose blinds I'd forgotten to close. I haven't heard from the police, now there's no question of opening that blind again, but I don't feel very safe here anymore, even if the person has no way of getting in. A little red truck? Hi, I'm posting this story that happened to me a few years ago, and I still don't know what happened. I've had several really annoying encounters, being a woman really, but this one in particular stuck with me because I still don't understand. At the time I lived on the boulevards in Bordeaux. For those who don't know, it's simply a huge boulevard that runs all the way around the city center. There's a lot of traffic on these boulevards, so I often walked home alone at night without necessarily being afraid because it's very well lit and there were always people there. During that time, I was working at McDonald's, big up student jobs. One evening, I was coming home from work. The McDonald's where I work is 40 minutes from my house, so I took the tram home and finished the journey on foot. It's around 11 p.m. I get on the tram. Since it was the middle of the week, there was no one on the tram. I sit down, put in my headphones, and the tram leaves. 1 or 2 stops later, a man gets on the tram. He's a tall guy, a bit sloppy, with very worn shoes. I don't really notice him, and he stays standing in front of the door. Even though at that moment I'm not at all scared, I turn off the music on my headphones. Without taking them off, you never know. After a few minutes, he comes towards me in the aisle between the seats. I'm about to take out my best floppy disk to pack him up, but instead of talking to me, he just puts a little red truck on the seat next to me, and he keeps walking to sit on a seat behind me, a little further away. So at that moment, I'm confused. I'm thinking, why did he put that there? But I don't dare turn around to look at him, so I turn slightly to be able to look at him in the reflection of the tram windows. And I see him, posed, a big smile on his lips, his eyes fixed on me. So at that moment, I start to get scared, and he meets my gaze in the reflection. It makes my blood run cold, so I just decide to ignore it. I turn my head and I say to myself, well, he's a weird guy, I'll just wait for it to pass, and at worst, I'll send a message to my boyfriend. He'll come and pick me up at my stop, and everything will be fine. So I do it. Obviously, my boyfriend doesn't answer me, and then the guy starts to have a huge laugh, but really loud. And he starts talking to me from the back of the tram. But he doesn't say anything other than, "You like my truck, huh? My truck is beautiful, huh?" And I freak out, LOL. I pretend I don't hear him, moving my head slightly as if I'm listening to music. But he continues, and I can tell he's a little annoyed that I'm not responding. Luckily, at that moment, another guy with a pizza in his hand gets on the tram. The guy is young, and he immediately looks at me with a raised eyebrow, like, what's going on? Because the guy with the truck keeps calling me to talk to him about his truck. I'm petrified, but the fact that I'm not alone anymore reassures me a little. 2 stops before mine, I get up and go stand in front of the doors next to Mr. Pizza. Mr. Truck, right when I get up, gets up too, gets his truck, and stands in front of the sportsman at the back of the tram. I say to myself, well, either he gets off at the next stop, in which case I'm safe, or he doesn't get off and waits, in which case it means he's following me, because he wouldn't have gotten up for nothing. So I wait, obviously he doesn't get off at the next stop, and I see my stop coming up, my boyfriend not answering, and probably some crazy person who will get off at the same stop as me to follow me. So I feel very uncomfortable. I look into the eyes of the pizza guy, kind of desperate. And thank God the pizza guy gets off at the same stop as me, and the truck guy, who continues to laugh and talk to himself about his truck. So I get off the tram and I start walking with a knot in my stomach. And I feel someone walking very close behind me, so I'm very scared. But when I turn around, I see the pizza guy, who gives me a wink, kind of reassuring. I feel a little relieved, so I keep walking. And after 5 minutes, at this point, I'm almost home. I hear the pizza guy say to me, "Hey, I think it's okay then." I turned around and chatted with him for a bit, and he told me that Mr. Truck was following me, but he quickly changed route when he saw Mr. Pizza hot on my heels, watching behind him. Since I was like 2 minutes from home, I thanked the pizza guy and walked home really fast, LOL. And I never ran into him again, so I still don't know why he did that, what he was up to with his truck, and I was incredibly lucky to run into a very kind guy. By the way, if you recognize yourself, thanks again, who understood that I was in deep distress. And honestly, I don't know what would have happened if I had been truly alone. This is going to be a pretty quick story, and yet it traumatized me. One evening, I was sleeping at a friend's house. In the middle of the night, around 4 a.m., I still couldn't sleep. My friend was in a very deep sleep, and personally, I felt bad. I have psychological problems that were very significant at the time. I was 21. And I felt the need to go home. I lived with my father, a short walk, about 15 minutes from my friend's house. So I packed my things, wrote a note on a post-it note to let him know I was going home, and left the house. The streetlights were off. It was April, so it was still pitch black and quite cold. So I used my phone's flashlight to guide me in the darkness. I walked for about 2 minutes before feeling uneasy. A minute later, I realized that a car with its headlights off, when I called back, everything was off and dark, was driving behind me. I took a look. It was a red car. I quickened my pace, then I hid in a corner of the street. I heard the car stop and 2 people get out. Without hesitation, I hid under a car. I was terrified, but I told myself that it must be paranoia. I heard the 2 people talking and fuming. She was there. She couldn't have disappeared like that, damn it. It was 2 men's voices that I didn't know. I understood that these people didn't want me well, so I stayed hidden under the car. I could hear them looking for me. Then they received a phone call. Well, I suppose since I heard a ringing. They quickly spoke saying, "We had one, but it escaped us." I waited for them to get back into their car, drive off, and from that moment on, I counted to 2,000 just to be sure I was safe. At the end of the 2,000, I cautiously got out and ran home like I've never run before. Not even a minute from home, I recognized the car. I took a picture of the license plate and ran back into my house in a panic. I immediately woke my father to tell him what had happened to me. I also entered the plate I had taken a picture of into a license plate analysis search engine. Everything matched, the model, the plate, except the color. On the site, the car was supposed to be black and not red. Anyway, I didn't file a complaint, but since then, I no longer go out alone at night. And above all, I have developed hypervigilance with regard to vehicles or people who follow me in the street. Thanks, Dad. Hi. After reading this, I decided to post this little anecdote, which really traumatized me. A few years ago, I was 21 or 22 years old, and I was working on a call center. It was winter, it got dark early, and at the time I was also working on a French overseas territory campaign, so I started at 2 p.m. and finished at 10 p.m. So 10 p.m. arrived, I left work, got back in my car, and headed home, where my cats, a good TV series, and a blanket were waiting for me. At the time, I was living in my father's old house in a remote village with no signal. My father had taken over my grandparents' house after they died, 100 meters away. Only one house separated us, so even though we were cut off from the world, I felt safe. The village is located in a valley, so to enter my yard, there's a small slope between the street and the house. Suffice to say that we didn't enter my house by mistake. You should have already seen that there was an entrance. I park my car, quickly go into the house because it was very cold. And in less than 10 minutes, I'm showered, lying down and watching my series. In the middle of my episode, I hear a noise outside, but I don't notice. Barely a minute later, I hear a knock, very loud, at the entrance. The door is wooden, so needless to say, it echoes in every room. From upstairs in my bed, I am paralyzed. A woman's voice is speaking, but with my series on, which I haven't had time to turn off. I don't understand anything and think for a few seconds that it might be my mother-in-law, that there's a problem, and that since the phone hasn't been reconnected yet at their house, she needs to borrow the landline at my house. But as I start to go downstairs, the series finally on pause, I hear the woman say, "I know you're here." I'm cold, hot, I don't know what to think. It's not a normal sentence. I slowly go towards the skylight and I notice the headlights of a car and at least one silhouette in the passenger compartment. I then have a reflex that I think saved me, But I had the thought at the time that if the girl was there with good intentions, she was going to think I was crazy. I went down the stairs as quietly as possible, and only halfway. The window next to the door overlooks the arrival of the staircase in question, and I was afraid she would see me, and grabbed a phone case which my father had ordered me to use only in an emergency and went back up. Meanwhile, the woman knocked again, still just as loudly. She shouted that she had broken down and needed a phone. Except that the landing room before my bedroom overlooked the street, and I could clearly hear the engine running. And I saw that other figure again in the car, which looked like it was a man's. I opened the case I had retrieved, ready, and half opened my Velux, asking the woman to leave, which I would not open for her. And that's when I knew I wasn't crazy, but she was. "We know you're alone." She made my blood run cold, but I grew up there convinced that if I got into trouble, I was alone. I took the contents out of the case and slipped it out the window. It was my father's shotgun, the one he'd put aside because he'd gotten a nice birthday present, a new destructive device. Yes, I'm not a fan usually, but then I liked it, and that he'd left with me, unloaded of course, to deter any potential attackers. I had the light on, and I pretended I was loading it, making sure the noise was audible, and I just told her, "I've got my dad 100 yards away. He was online 30 seconds ago, and he has the same kind of rifle. I have quite a few rounds, and the ones I just loaded are for wild boars. Get back in your car before I have a chance to shoot. I'm aiming well." She tried to say something else, but I pointed the barrel right at her, and she ended up leaving. I called my dad on his cell phone, which has a little signal, 30 seconds later, frozen in fear. If you're wondering if he came with his rifle, yes, and his wasn't unloaded. But they were definitely gone. The next day, he brought one of his dogs back to my house, but I never had these kinds of problems again. Thank you for reading. I hope you enjoyed this story, even if I admit that it really left its mark on me even 6 years later. There are more true tales like this waiting for you. Stories that remind us the real world can be far scarier than fiction. So if you want to keep the lights on tonight, hit that subscribe button and check out the other horrors I've uncovered here on the channel. Stay safe, stay aware, and I'll catch you in the next video.